So, good morning and welcome to the Online Entrepreneur Academy podcast. And this morning we have the amazing Tracey Young with us, who deals with childhood trauma. And I'm going to hand over to Tracy to tell us what she does. Now, this will be a very in-depth conversation. It might have its less light moments, but Tracy does amazing work. So hang in there with us because this is a very important topic. So Tracy, over to you. How would you introduce yourselves to our audience of entrepreneurs and business owners, because we're going to look at both sides, doing what we love
Mm,
and helping other people. So tell us about
yeah,
you.
sure. So, yeah, as you've said, I'm Tracy, and I talk about childhood trauma and the impact that it has on adulthood, particularly if it's not something that people have really um, acknowledged that's happened in their lives, because some people don't necessarily. But I go in to talk about how some of these experiences that we have as children impact the decisions that we make in adulthood, and how that can be very detrimental to us, really, physically, emotionally, our mental health. Um, so that's what I like to talk about. I like to get the knowledge out there. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And I know when we've talked previously, because we know each other, which is
Yeah.
brilliant. Trauma is a very loaded word, isn't it? So could you tell us a little, I mean,
Mm.
how do we define trauma? What is trauma? Because yeah,
Yeah.
I'll let you answer that.
It's interesting when we talk about trauma, because adverse childhood experiences are childhood traumas that have happened to us between the ages of birth to 17. That's where it's defined, adverse childhood experiences. And there was a study that was done back in 1995, actually, about called the ACE study. And from that study, they identified that there were certain events that could happen into a child's life, um, and there are 10 things that they've defined. So they say, if you've been as a child experienced childhood abuse, whether that's sexual, physical, emotional, if you've experienced neglect, um, if you've experienced domestic abuse amongst your parents or your caregivers, um, witnessed a parent maybe have taken their own lives or have died, have gone to prison, have had quite significant mental health problems, or if they did abuse substances. So that's
Hmm.
kind of like the 10 that they kind
Got
of
you.
cover.
Hmm.
Myself, and I need to make this clear, I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, in any way, shape, or form. I talk from my own personal experience, and I talk about it from the experience of being a social worker and people that I've worked with. So
Right.
that's where I feel that I have the knowledge around childhood traumas. So although I agree that there are 10, I
Mhm.
don't necessarily feel that there are just 10, because there's lots of different ways in which people experience trauma. And, just because it doesn't fall under one of those categories, it doesn't mean that has that massive, insignificant, significant impact on you.
Right. Got
So,
you.
yeah, so as an example of this, I would say when I was growing up, I had a brother. Sadly, he's not with us anymore, but my brother had learning disabilities, and he was a few years older than me, um, and he used to visit often. Um, but the abuse that we used to experience, and I used to experience, from the public and from people towards my brother, was shocking. And my mother, she would get abused from the public. People would say things like, he shouldn't be here, he should be locked away somewhere, we shouldn't have to look at him in society. And he would be physically attacked, and I would be forever defending him and getting into these scuffles with people, just to defend him, really. And
Goodness me.
actually, that is quite traumatic, you
Yeah, I
know.
see what you're saying, of course.
So, you know, so for me, when people talk about these 10 ACEs, I don't think it is just,
Gotcha.
categorized as these 10.
Mm.
That they are certainly significant, but I think that there are other traumas that people experience as a
Mm.
child.
And I just think
Um,
different people react in different ways to different situations.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, adding on to that, there were other things that I grew up with as well, other kind of traumas. There was child abuse when I was growing up. My parents did divorce. So there were a few of these other categories that the ACE study talks about that I, also did experience. Um, the other thing about the childhood traumas, um, uh, within the study, they talk about if you receive, it's probably not the right word, but if you
Mm.
experience more than 4 of these
Okay.
childhood traumas, um, that has more of a significant impact on you growing up and when you become an adult. So most children, I should imagine, particularly growing up in the 70s, probably did experience some kind of trauma or another, but may have, managed to have the support that they needed at the time. For instance, the death of a parent, they may have experienced that, for instance,
Mm.
and received the right support so that it didn't necessarily go on to impact them
Got you.
in later life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does
So,
indeed. Yes.
mm, so I had 4 more traumas growing up, which were, very significant.
Yeah.
And I didn't know until much, much later in life how they affected me.
Mm-hmm.
I just, these things happened and I had to get on with it. I didn't get the support that, most people or some people may have received. I didn't get it till much, much later in life.
Mm.
And looking back now, I can see all the different behaviours that I was demonstrating as a result of those childhood traumas, because
Mm.
there are characteristics of someone's experienced those childhood traumas. So some of those characteristics are, you might become a mean person. I'm not necessarily saying that I was a mean person, but I do think I was an angry person,
Yeah,
for sure. I did carry a lot of anger around with me.
makes sense. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so, people would be, if they're under this mean category, if you like. I don't really like to categorize it like that, but it's the only way that you can actually
Yeah,
explain
to
the
describe it. Yeah.
process of it, if you like. Um, yeah, so you might become mean, you might be critical of people, you don't want to make those friendships, all those kind of things.
Mhm.
Um, One of the other things, that people might demonstrate is that they will look for love in the wrong places,
Yeah.
because their confidence is quite low, self-esteem is quite low as a result of what they've experienced and what I experienced. So this is an example of another example of my personal life is, I found love in the wrong place. And I entered into a domestic abusive relationship. So I was in that relationship for about a year and a half. Um, and it's very, very common for victims of childhood trauma to enter into these really, really unhealthy relationships.
Mhm.
Actually, a recent study from the Office of National Statistics actually states that over 51% of people that experience childhood trauma enter into domestic abusive relationships. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's
An
quite
ongoing
shocking, isn't it?
impact, isn't it? Yeah, as you say.
Absolutely. Of
Mm.
course, the problem with that is if you're then in those relationships and then you have children, that cycle then
Mm.
carries on.
Carries on, yes. A
Mm,
never-ending circle. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
that. I think that's really insightful and interesting, and understanding what you're saying helps us understand people who might be presenting in a very negative way, young people obviously
Absolutely.
I'm talking about, and then, as you said, into adult.
Yes,
Yeah. Sorry, I
absolutely.
interrupted you. Carry on.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say there's some other characteristics, controlling behavior. People become controlling, they are very organized people. They like things in order. It's a sense of being in control of their life. And that is another,
Mm.
um, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are controlling people regardless, but
Yeah.
if you kind of add the characteristics together, it
Mm.
makes a bigger picture. Um, but yeah, very controlling, very precise. They like things in order. You can't step outside of that because it's just too much to bear. It simply cannot bear it. Uh, Being rebellious is another one. So people become very rebellious.
Mhm.
Um, uh, they call them trying to find my words, like adrenaline junkies. So also people that are victims of childhood trauma um, go on to enter into very risky behaviour, completely more risky than somebody that they don't see
Yeah.
because of the life that they've lived growing up. Everything
Mhm.
was a risk constantly, and it's kind of become their state of mind.
Yeah, they're
So
normal.
it is absolutely the norm. So then they'll get into, like, as I say, sort of those high risk behaviours, but also they go down the substance misuse
Mm.
road as well, which is also quite common. I certainly in my early 20s used alcohol to manage my emotions, I
Mm.
think, early on. And I didn't know I was doing that, again, as I say, until a bit later on in life. I wouldn't say I was alcohol dependent, but when I wasn't feeling great, it was easier to just,
Have a
go
drink.
and have a drink.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that makes huge sense.
yeah, yeah. So it's very, and another characteristic, and there are a few, so I'll just talk about the last one, is people become very isolated. So they'll get into relationships and then they will, or get into friendships, but they'll break those friendships very quickly and very easily. The moment they feel that there's a challenge in that relationship, they will come out. They'll
Yeah.
say, no, enough's enough, not dealing with this, they're just too. And now some of these behaviours are, you might think they contradict each other, and in some ways they do. And you're not necessarily one or the other. You can be a combination of all of them. It
Yeah.
just depends on the individual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very insightful. And I think sometimes we're all guilty. Well, most of us are guilty of being very judgmental and just assuming someone is badly behaved and not thinking why. And that's not to go along the line,
Absolutely.
I guess, of excusing things, but understanding must be a path to helping
Yes.
and
Yes.
stopping this behaviour. Now, Tracy, you, as you said, you're a social worker, and from
Mm,
our entrepreneurial audience side, you're combining
mm,
your job with your own business of
yes.
helping people. So how did you move from what you've described to becoming a social worker? What inspired you to be a social worker
Yeah.
for other people?
I think because of my experiences of the child abuse as a child, I've just felt I had this, as I said earlier, I had this anger that I carried around with me all the time. And I had this, I'm not going to let this happen to other children. I was really, really sort of,
You directed it.
strongly. Absolutely. However, saying that, it was something I always wanted to do, but I never thought that I could do it. What makes me do it? The girl from the council estate, going to university. There's no way that was ever going to be within my reach, as I felt. However, I have been extremely lucky to have met an amazing man. I mean, how he put up with me in the early days, I do not know.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sure
but
that's not
yeah,
true.
I mean, I did everything I could to ruin that relationship, but
But he wasn't
no,
having it.
he wasn't having any of that. No, absolutely. And I think through having him by my side, I suppose, giving me that encouragement, making me feel safe,
Mhm.
um, it kind of like, and another thing happened as well, which was, it's very bizarre, but I do believe that it was very much part of why I did become a social worker, is that my brother that I talked about died unexpectedly, and I was just, I was beside myself. I just gave up. I was just totally. And then after about a year, I just thought, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do something just to occupy my mind, you know. And so I did the access course at college and then got my credits. And it's like, wow, maybe I could go to university.
Yeah,
Maybe I could be that social worker, you know. So it kind of just fell into place. How, I don't know, but these things do sometimes just fall into
they do,
place.
don't they? Yes.
Yeah, so I went to university. I felt a fraud the whole time I was there. I'll be honest. That imposter
Yeah.
syndrome that people have. I honestly did. The first year, I was like, "Wow, I've made it through the first year. Now I'm not going to make it through the second one."
No
Um,
doubt.
but I met a bunch of incredible women, absolutely incredible, and we're still the best of friends even now. And that's 20 years next year, but they helped me get through as well. It was just, we were so like-minded. That's why we were on the same course.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I managed to get through university, and my aim was to work in child protection, which I did for a period of time, and it was like, yes, yes.
Yes.
How did that happen? I was still in awe of myself, I think, to be honest, for
Well,
quite a
well done
while
you.
afterwards. So yeah, very, very yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
No, great. So, and again, for people listening in the audience, if sometimes we don't necessarily see the path isn't clear, but you just take little steps, don't you? The first step and then the
100%.
next step, rather than worrying about, oh my goodness, it seemed like a huge mountain to climb, because, you know,
Yeah,
clearly
absolutely.
very capable person, and just one step at a time.
And I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy and that each step was really easy, because it really wasn't. Because as I said, I had this imposter syndrome where I was just like, this can't be me,
Mm.
because I was in like two different places. I was in this, yeah, I can do it, and I've got the support of my family, but then there was this child still that said, well, what makes you think you can do it?
Yeah.
Where there was no self-esteem, there was no confidence. And I know that sounds quite bizarre, again, a conflict, but something just kept me going. Like you say, it was a small step at a time. And I had to work really, really hard. I wasn't brought up in a school where we was allowed to use computers, 70s, 80s child. So I had to learn all of that, which was just, oh, yeah.
I feel you on that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
We didn't even have
Yeah.
computers. We all wrote it up by hand and typed it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah.
So that brings us now. So what made you say for, so you've got obviously your passion, and that's so clear. So at what point did you think, I'm going to actually branch out and do a little bit on my own? How did that come about? So that because if correct me if I'm wrong, you're working for.
Sorry, you froze for a second then.
Oh no, right. Frozen podcast. No,
Sorry.
saying no, it's probably a connection here. But at what point did you think, I'm going to do a little bit of my own work as well as working in the social as a social worker? Because you do both, don't you, now?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think because of some of the areas that I've worked in social work. So I have worked in substance misuse. I have worked in domestic abuse services. I now work in adults, by the way. I
Mhm.
don't longer work in children's, but I do work in adults. And, there's this constant theme of people coming through with the same things, and it's substance misuse and it's domestic abuse, and you know it just it helped me to understand myself a bit more, and I wanted to learn more about why was I doing this, why was I doing that,
Mm.
because even though I was a social worker, I'm a social worker, it doesn't make me, you know, resilient to everything else that goes on. You know, we're still humans
Yeah.
too, and it does bring up some of this stuff for yourself that you see in other people, and
Mhm.
you know, it can bring in some triggers of your own. And I just thought I need to know what this is about. When I'm low in mood, I don't want to be low in mood anymore. I don't want to have this anxiety anymore. I don't want to live like I'm on the edge.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned very quickly about myself, um, once I started looking into this a bit more about childhood traumas, is like, oh my goodness, I've been in this constant fight mode, constantly been fighting. And I didn't realize I was doing it all of the time, defensive, very defensive. Um, and, you know, at times that got me into some, you know, difficult conversations with people in some challenging situations. And I also think as you get older, you realize, you know, choose your battles, because some things just aren't worth fighting. And so I started looking more into about who I was as a person, and that was the first thing I identified. And once I identified that
Hmm.
and realized where that came from, it was almost like, oh my goodness, like I let that go. I let that go. And I felt so much happier just from that little bit of what I've let go. Um, but I didn't know, and that's the bit that I feel passionate about. I
Hmm.
couldn't make those changes until I understood it. Once I understood that behaviour, why I was behaving that way,
Mm.
it was a light bulb moment. And
Mm.
then I realised I don't have to, why do I need to feel the need to have to be in this fight mode all the time? But it's called survival.
Yeah.
That's where I was. I was trying to survive all the time. And I realised then that I didn't need to be in that mind. I'm not no longer under that threat that I was under.
That's awesome. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it kind of brought me into wanting to do this more. Because the more I started to learn about myself, the more I realised there has got to be thousands and thousands of people out there
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
are doing the same. And I just love to just share the knowledge with them,
Mm.
share the knowledge with people who work with people, to understand that some of these behaviors aren't, it's about that individual. It's not about, you know, wanting to fight the world. It's
Mm.
not. It's just they don't know any other way. And we've got to teach people to understand that.
Yeah, that's I mean, I'm not knowing anything really about your subject. This is so interesting. So
Mm,
it feels to me like this is a mammoth task. So if someone, is listening to this and thinking, oh, I recognize that in myself,
mm,
just really as a side to what we're talking, how do they reach out? Now, obviously, we're going to have show notes and they can reach out to you, but
mm.
sadly, you can't help the whole of the English speaking world. So
No,
what's the first step in if someone's thinking, wow, this makes sense? Where do they
mm.
go?
I mean, the first thing I would say is, you know, trust yourself,
Hmm.
and trust yourself to look into it. Do it
Right,
yourself first. Okay. Just, it's going to be painful. I'm not going to lie. It will be painful. But the moment they've acknowledged it,
right.
and it's a light bulb moment for them, they're going to want to know, what can I do? And the first thing I would say, as I did, just look it up a little bit. Go with
Hmm.
yourself to start with. Go with what you're comfortable to go towards. Okay. So if you feel that you're constantly angry and you can see that it's linked to something that's happened in the past as a child growing up, you know, first of all, make sure you feel prepared for that. You know, I would always encourage people to do that, but do it a little step at a time. The other place would be, you know, other places are there's lots of charities and there's lots of information out there. It depends on how they're demonstrating, if it's anger, in what way, because they could be going down the criminal justice system. They can stop themselves from going down the criminal justice system. It's not unusual to go and commit crime, as I was talking earlier about the high risk.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, so if it's drugs or alcohol that they're doing, look into services that can support with that. But go at your own pace. Don't go at a pace where one person's journey may be a lot shorter than another person's. But there are support services out there. There's lots of organisations. There's lots of charities. There is more talk about childhood traumas and support. I mean, where I am in my area, there is particularly services around childhood trauma. You can Google it, or whatever, and you'll find it. You can learn about it from podcasts, people that are talking about it. It just depends. You can either go directly for that therapy if that's what you want, or you can take a few steps yourself to learn a little bit about it and about yourself, because you don't always know what you're looking for until you understand what it is.
No, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because someone might, I guess, just because we see some young people around, they seem so angry. And maybe to what you were saying earlier, just not understanding why they're so angry and getting angry at, as you know, I'm in education. Some people, there's like no reason. What was the trigger? Can't understand it. And if we can't, probably they can't either.
Oh,
On a
and
small
that's
basis.
it. Yeah, and so therefore people want to label, as you were saying earlier, people then want to label people or children or young adults or whatever. They can't be bothered to, go and get a job, or, they're lazy or they're angry, or all these labels, because it's easy. It's easier to label somebody and then you can forget about them and you can give up on them.
Yeah, which
Why
is
bother? Yeah,
such a shame. Yeah, why bother? That's the common sort of attitude, isn't it? Oh, they're just, let's move on to the next thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then as that must compound, they feel more ignored, more angry, more upset. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the older they get, or for me, the older I got, the more angry I become, because I didn't know where to go and I didn't know what to do. And nobody ever asked me, you know, why are you so angry? Why are you like that? Why? Nobody asked me. Nobody had any understanding or knowledge around childhood traumas and how to raise that conversation with somebody, have that conversation with somebody. No, you know, nobody asked. But that's because people didn't know about it. They didn't know what to ask. They couldn't recognize the behaviors. They didn't know the behaviors, So maybe if I'd been asked, who knows, I wouldn't have gone so long without understanding
Yeah.
myself better.
No, that's a really good thing to leave to leave with our audience. Ask, don't just, we mustn't just assume, and as you say, put labels on people. So what do you do now, Tracy, in your you've got your day
Yeah.
job with the social, but what are you doing? How are you structuring what you do to help people with?
Yeah. So what I'm doing going forward from this is, what I want to do is I want to educate others, professionals,
Yeah.
oh, teachers, other social workers, because as I say, even in social work, unless you work with children's as adults, adult social worker, we're not told this stuff. We're not taught this stuff.
No.
Um, so yeah, teachers, social workers, the police, the prison service, all of these services that work with vulnerable people
Mm.
or work with people that are committing crimes or are in substance misuse or have mental health issues, or like charities,
Mm.
anybody and everybody. I mean, when you think about it, who shouldn't know about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it makes such sense what you're saying. Go to the grassroots, goes to the individuals who are meeting and interacting with numbers of
Yes.
people every day. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
We shouldn't know about it. Indeed, and the police. This would be so helpful for the police, wouldn't it, to have more knowledge? And
Yes,
it seems to me that situations might be able to be diffused if some of us knew more about this. And as you say, asking the right question.
absolutely. And I'm not saying at the same time there aren't people that get into crime and you know all these other things for other
Yeah,
reasons,
sure.
because of course people do, you know. People haven't experienced childhood traumas but still choose to go down the criminal
Yeah,
route, or they still choose to, you know, abuse substances or whatever that,
yeah.
you know, that I'm not saying every single person that's experiencing this.
No, and that's a good thing to remind people. That's absolutely not where you're coming
Absolutely.
from.
You know, I think sometimes social workers can be seen as the tree huggers that want to save the world, and everybody, you know, kind of forgive everybody for everything. And I'm not saying that at all.
No.
I am not saying that. I
Reality
think people
check. Good one. Thank you.
absolutely, yeah, you know, you got to be realistic about this. There are people that just want to do what they want to do, but I'm just saying, you know, when I worked in substance misuse, interestingly, actually I was working at a hospital. I went into a hospital where they were looking at rehabilitation and detoxing. And one of I said, how come there's so many? Give me an idea of the people that you have in here. And he said 75% of the people that were there for treatment were victims of childhood abuse. 75%. I was
That
staggered.
that is staggering. And so we just lost the connection for a nanosecond. This was in a hospital,
Like,
yeah? Yeah, wow.
yeah, a mental health hospital where they do detox and rehab programs. But yeah, 75% were victims of childhood abuse. I mean, that just, if
Staggering.
that's not telling us something,
It certainly is, isn't it?
it,
Yeah.
you know, it's shocking. It is shocking.
Heartbreaking, shocking and
So
heartbreaking.
let's try and be, um, as professionals, let's try and be a bit more understanding. Let's try and understand, but let us be able to ask those questions. Let us feel comfortable to ask those
Yeah.
questions, but ask those questions in the right way. We have to be really careful how we ask those questions, you
Mm.
know, the right times. And I think if we can get young people now, we've got a better chance of helping them to make changes for the better
Yeah,
in their
yeah,
life,
that makes
rather than wait till you get as old as me and then realise, oh,
there's the young
that
person
makes
opposite me.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose
Yeah.
when you speak to people individually, it's not just a textbook understanding. I'm very sorry that you've had these experiences,
Mm.
but given that happened, that must help you to understand where they're coming from. It's not, as I say, not just a textbook understanding, like, yeah, I get you, I really understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I feel, you know, if you think about it, if we can support people that have had these experiences
Mm,
for the better, they can then go on and help other people
yeah,
because they've been there, they've lived it, they've understood it. Um, so having the life experiences
yeah,
is the best way to be able to support other people. Again, I'm not saying that you can't learn from a textbook, of course you can, but how genuine is that going to feel to that other person that you're talking to, whether you know it's real or not?
yeah,
You know, we've all been in a situation where someone's telling us we should do something and yet they've never done it themselves,
yeah.
and you just think, whatever,
Seriously.
what do you know? You know, and people know that, people sense that.
Yes,
People aren't silly. People will pick up a genuine connection with somebody. um but that's not saying my experience is the same as your experience. Of course it's not.
it's different.
Absolutely, everybody's is different, but that you have that empathy because you have that bit of understanding
Yeah,
of how it feels.
yeah. And you could sort of recognize it. early in my career, I was in a situation of work when there was someone who was a real bully, but that very small but experience, immediately you recognize someone who's in the same situation, and
Yes.
the empathy, and you can almost, in my example, you can catch something at the beginning because you can see where
Yes.
it's going, and sort of
Yes.
pull the brakes back a bit.
Absolutely. That is the key, isn't it? Recognizing it early.
Yeah,
Recognizing it early. And that's why I want to, educate others
yeah.
to recognize that early,
Mm.
show them early.
Yeah. So, can I say, what's the plan, Tracy? Are you going to be going to schools? I know we've spoken a bit about this before we
Mm,
started. Are
mm.
you hoping to go into schools to um, help staff understand this? What's the route that you're taking this? Because it's
Yes.
so
So,
important.
absolutely. So, yes, it is talking in schools. Not, I think that it's got to be age appropriate, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Um, uh, you know, talking in schools like last year of school, colleges, universities, um, when it's really, really, you're going to catch them at the right age, if
Yeah.
that makes it
It
sounds a
does,
bit
it does
bizarre,
make
but the
no,
way
no,
I've
it does
worded
make
that,
sense.
but you know, um, but yeah, and spreading out really to become
Mm.
a bit of a speaker around this. But
Yeah,
again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm none of those things. I'm just me
yeah.
who's experienced it and seen it in so I've been a social worker for 16 years,
Mm.
um, and I'm a woman of a certain age now. So when you kind of combine that, there's a
Yes,
lot of years there,
there are. Yeah,
and
and
that
that's it.
that's mm,
Sorry, and while you're obviously, and it's professionally, it's clear to say what you're not. There's a whole load of things there that you are. As you say, you're a qualified social worker. You've got loads of experience, personal experience as well. That is so
mm.
much. So if someone's listening to this and saying, "Oh my goodness, there's a school, there's a college, there's a work organisation that I want to put in touch with Tracy," and we'll put this in the show notes. What's the best way to
Sure.
contact you, Tracy?
I would say best way would by email at
Okay,
this time.
fantastic. Yeah.
I'm still working on some other stuff in the background to get that up and running, and get myself out there. But I will be creating a WhatsApp group as well.
Oh,
So
awesome.
anybody that, wants to email me or message me,
Okay.
you've obviously you can see my name, so you could probably find me on WhatsApp, which is fine. And then if I feel like they would be a good candidate for a group of a support group within a
Yeah.
WhatsApp group, then that's what I'm looking for, for people
Awesome.
to support each other as well,
I like
only
this
from a
email because,
positive. Mm,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I like this email because it's a private first touch. A lot of my guests
yes,
got social media, and probably you have as well. But certainly for this area that we're talking about, email is a great first touch point indeed. Yeah,
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
that's awesome. So let's just change. It's very difficult to move from a very serious and important topic to something a little bit
yeah.
lighthearted. Tracy, we in the conversations, we usually sort of, when we move towards the end, and I don't want this to end because it's such a powerful conversation for me to listen to, we move to sort of lighter moments. So
Yeah.
uh, I asked one of my previous guests to leave a question. So that's the first thing. So the in terms of your career, the
Mhm.
question was there one pivotal moment in your
In my
career
career, um,
that you thought, that light bulb moment?
oh gosh, it's a
Do you know when?
difficult one, that, because yeah, because I get quite a few, if I'm honest, because I've worked in safeguarding, so
Ah,
um, I've kind of heard lots of different, people that are suicidal or have attempted to commit suicide and that kind of stuff. And, those, for me personally,
yeah,
those have been the moments where I'm like, I don't want to feel the same as that person. And, the empathy, and I know what the internal turmoil that I've had, it makes me think this
wow.
is why I want to
Why you want
keep working on myself
Mhm.
and keep doing what I'm doing so I can help inform others, because they've talked about child abuse experiences and things like that. So,
Yeah,
but I mean, there's been so many incredible
yeah, I can imagine.
situations.
And when I thought, if I'm asking myself that question, I wasn't clear what I would answer. So I thank you for sharing that, and nothing more important than that. Now, a much lighter moment. Imagine
Okay.
we're familiar with these sort of questions from our own homegrown Radio 4, but you're on a desert island. You're
Yeah.
allowed one luxury, and it's not a boat, that's cheating. And
Yeah.
I will say it to my guests, it's not a boat.
Yeah.
Apart from a boat, what luxury would you take with you?
Oh gosh, this is going to sound so shallow.
No,
Really,
not at
really
all.
shallow. I've been asked this before, and I'm like in a room with lots of people, and they've come up with these incredible things, and I said, a moisturizer.
A what was that? A moisturizer. No,
Moisturizer.
I, I can, as a woman of a much senior age to you, I can totally relate to that. Okay.
I know. It's just, yeah, sorry, but yeah,
No,
it's a bit
that's all
boring.
right. No, well, no, you're fine because, as I often say, one of my guests chose toothbrush and toothpaste, so I totally relate. Okay, so you've got the faith book of your choice. So you've got your faith book. What other book would you take with you? And you've got Shakespeare as well.
Oh gosh. Ooh, book. It would have to be something that's trauma informed, to be honest.
All right.
Um, yeah,
Oh,
something that, because I can't absorb enough.
no,
I just find the whole thing so
you're so passionate about
interesting
what you do,
and
Trace.
fascinating. Mm,
That's amazing.
yeah.
We need to give you the boat so you can get off the island and go and do more good. And the final question, one food of your choice. I mean, you've got the fish swimming and you've got the fruit growing from the trees, but what one
One food.
food that you would
Oh
particularly
God.
like to take with you?
I'm sorry to all the vegetarians and vegans out there, but it's got to be steak.
Okay.
It's got to be the old classic steak and chips, I'm afraid.
Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with classic dishes at all. And I normally only ask three, but I'm going to push it to the third question.
Go for it.
Music. What music are you going to take with you?
Oh, some good old classic 80s.
I'm with you on that one.
Good old classic 80s, without a doubt. Yeah.
You're
Because
in
although there's all this that happened in my childhood, I had some great memories as well. Some great memories of at the discos with the 80s and the synchronized dancing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, loved it. Bit of Adamant and all that.
Awesome indeed. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. And to everyone listening, or whether you're watching us on YouTube, just look in the show notes because the contact details will be there, and some of the things that Tracy's referred to. And we'll pin you down on a book to put in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us today. And it's Olympic. Tracy, I wanted to ask, as we're recording this in the Olympic weeks, um,
Yeah.
if you could choose one sport to be a world champion in, what sport would you choose? Or maybe you are already, and I don't know this.
No. Oh God. Boxing.
Boxing, fair enough. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I love boxing.
Um,
Yeah,
Great. Tracy
yes.
Young, thank you for joining us today, and we'll speak soon. Take care.
Thank you so much, Susan. Take care. Thank you.